Go ahead and get started. Hopefully you saw the email I sent out over the weekend with all the video links. So we're going to pick up with what's on the syllabus actually for today, or the revised syllabus for today, which is, I gotta get the date right, 28th. My Heart Leaps Up, page 758 in the 11th edition. If you're using the other one, it's 950. A little short lyric by William Wordsworth, one of the leaders in what's called, or one of the most important poets in what's called the Romantic movement, or the Romantic school of poetry. The Romantics didn't have anything to do with, well, let me rephrase that. Romantic does not refer to romantic love. Romantic refers to an outlook on life that looks towards simplicity, it looks towards nature, for meaning and happiness or joy, okay? Too simplistic, but that's what we have time for. So, William Wordsworth, my heart leaps up. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Now look at what he's saying there. First two lines are pretty easy. He sees a rainbow and is filled with joy. I mean, it has that aha moment. I saw a picture the other day of a couple of years ago, someplace in upstate New York. They had some rain shower, and a guy got a picture of 5 rainbows in one shot. It was lasted very briefly. Anyways, so that's clearly would have been an aha moment. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. Notice that third line kind of takes us back to, in speaking of the speaker of the poem, the speaker's childhood. Now what is one of the differences between children and adults? I mean, there's a ton of them, right? But one of them is this idea or this sense of wonder, of just everything they see kind of fills them with wonder. Take a little kid for a walk, and they'll pick up a rock, they'll pick up a twig, it looks like something, blah, 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 okay? So that third line kind of, takes us back to the speaker's childhood when seeing a rainbow, was just totally amazing. And then line 4, so is it now, I am a man. So when my life began and now I am a man, I don't know that this is meant to be an allusion. It is at the very least elusive of St. Paul, somewhere in the New Testament, talking about, when I was a child, I did childish things, but now I'm a man and I don't do childish things. Wordsworth is suggesting, through the speaker of the poem, that there are some things an adult should still perceive like a child. Okay? So is it now I am a man, so be it when I shall grow old. And notice, comma, pause, because he's not finished. That's not a declaration. It's a conditional. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. Okay? What does the or let me die mean? Or imply? Or let me rephrase that. When?
When he loses his sense of wonder?
Yes. Don't let me live until I no longer take joy in seeing that rainbow. Okay? The child is father of the man. What kind of figure of speech is that? Or what term do we have for that? a bit of a paradox, right? We usually think the man is the father of the child. So how is the child the father of the man? Where does the man come from? The child. The child grows into, becomes the man. That's what he means by that line. And I could wish my days to be bound each to each, that is each day linked by what? By natural piety, not religious, the speaker is saying. That is, this sense of love and devotion caused by being in nature and by what nature, how nature speaks to one, etc., etc. We could kind of go back, and read this and then go back and look at Ode to the West Wind, which is all about, the speakers talking about the west wind inspire me, instill in me, this uncontrollable desire and all that. Keats and Shelley, both romantic poets, along with Wordsworth, along with William Blake, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. I mean, those are the major poets of that whole romantic period that goes from the late 18th century, 1770 or so, to the early 19th century, 1830, 1840 or so. Okay, go from there to page 980. Sorry, 780. Can't read this morning. The world is too much with us. Nice little sonnet. Okay? And you can kind of think of this sonnet in conjunction with God's Grandeur by Gerard Manley Hopkins. All right? So the world is too much with us. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Notice 4 single-syllable declarative words. It moves us not. Pause, hyphen, long break. Okay, the poet is implying. Great God! I'd rather be a pagan suckle than a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. Let's go back to the first quatrain. The world is too much with us. What does that mean? It's like we carry it all around us, everywhere we go. But what's meant kind of specifically by the world?
Maybe like materialistic things?
Yeah, partially.
Like trivial things?
Materialistic things, trivial things, cares, burdens, problems. Okay? We bear all of that upon us, the speaker is saying. Okay? Late and soon. Okay? Late, kind of like long ago, and soon, just a moment ago. Getting in spending, so receiving in giving away or throwing away, etc. What? We lay waste our powers. Late and soon, or what kind of words?
Time.
They're adverbs of time. Okay? What's our powers? Well, part of our powers is living in time. We lay waste our powers in time. How? Getting and spending. There's your materialism. Christmas. Okay? But what does he mean by we waste our powers? We dissolve ourselves, as it were. We forget what our real, self is. Little we see in nature out there that is ours. That is, we don't see anything in nature that relates to us. Now, he's publishing this in 1807, 215 years ago. Think how different, to use the word Trinity, more materialistic we are today than in 1807. Think how more removed from the natural world, even with all the environmental, stuff going on, we are today than they were in 1807.
Where is he from?
England.
England?
Yep.
Do you think that line would mean more like little we see in nature, as in like the sense of adventure is gone?
Could be that.
Like there's not much nature to explore.
Could be that, because this is early in the industrial age. But what is one of the things that's happening not only in the industrial age, but as of the Age of Enlightenment, the period from roughly 1650 to 1800 or so, nature has, in a sense, become, I've got to write it down to spell it, desacralized. That is, it's no longer thought of as a means of grace, kind of a thing. Because scientific discovery, scientific understanding, we now understand how XYZ happens, etc., etc. Age of Enlightenment is Age of Reason, is the other name for it, where reason takes over as the most important thing in human life. Reason, intellect, the rise of science, all of that, okay? So little we see in nature that is ours. Also, less adventure, less frontier kind of a mentality, except for in America, because America still has the whole westward expansion, quote unquote, manifest destiny, that kind of nonsense. My opinion. But also, again, we don't see our relationship to nature. That's why I kind of suggested go back and look at, God's grandeur, which is several decades after this poem. Okay? And in there, Hopkins says, what has humanity done? We've toiled, we've bleared and smeared. We trod no longer barefoot, we no longer have any connection with nature. And yet he says, and yet, even though the dark blackness on the westward, dims, the brown eastward rises, the Holy Spirit still charges everything with God. Well, there is no Christian God being referred to in this poem. So, little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away. A sordid boon. Now, the boon is like a reward. It's something you're willing to give something away for or to receive. It's better than what you've given away, right? He's saying, the speaker is saying, we've given our hearts away for something that's not as good as what we had before. We've exchanged nature, so to speak, for what's the opposite of nature? Look where we are, literally, right here, right now. Tell me, almost, maybe there is something, one thing in this room that is quote unquote natural. Everything in here is artificial.
Technically us.
Well, we're the only natural beings, because, the modern mind describes nature and humanity as what? There's a hurricane, there's a tornado, there's a flood. What is described usually as happening at that point?
A natural disaster.
It's a natural disaster that we can't control. Why? Because Mother Nature and humanity seemingly have been split in two. The modern mindset says we're not part of nature, and yet we are, okay? But this isn't. This is totally artificial, all right? This is totally artificial, even though it's made of tree pulp, etc. So everything we see around us right now, other than the humans here, is artificial. That's kind of what he's getting at. And then he tells us, the speaker tells us, where he is and what he's looking at. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon. Right? Because the sea is never covered to the moon. I know, clouds and all that kind of stuff. It's not what he's talking about. The winds that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. What's that imply that we are out of tune? What's a phrase we would use today to kind of describe that?
I would say like too far removed.
Okay, true. We might use the phrase out of sync. Like sometimes you watch something on TV and the mouths will move and then the sound is like a second delay. That's what he means. Star Trekkers would say we're out of phase. Like their reality is just a split second difference. Okay? He says, so for the sea, for the moon, for the winds, for this and everything, we are out of tune. We are not working. If we're out of tune, we're not working how with nature.
Together.
Tune is what kind of terminology? It's musical. So we're not in harmony with nature. We are creating disharmony with nature. All right? It moves us not. It, nature. It doesn't move us. It doesn't impact us. And that's kind of, go back for a second to my heart leaps up, This is like, this speaker is, the speaker in my heart leaps up, gone old. And no longer sees the joy of the rainbow, so to speak. Okay? The rainbow, the thunder, it moves us not. Period. Now, even though that's not the end of the 8th line, that kind of there in the middle of the line where the caesura is, that's kind of the volta. We get a twist, we get a turn, we get a contradiction. Great God. Now, that could be, the Christian God. I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. How's that for a paradox or an oxymoron? Great God, a pagan creed outworn. What's outworn imply?
Not of use anymore.
Not of use anymore or not believed. It's outworn. Why? It's been replaced. The pre-Christian pagan belief systems, whichever ones you want to think about, kind of get replaced in much of the world by Christianity. Okay? His pagan belief, because he's going to refer to a couple? Yeah, going to refer to a couple. He's going to refer to a couple of Greek gods. That would be kind of one of the pagan belief systems. Why? Because the Greek gods were largely nature gods. Poseidon, god of the ocean. Also Proteus, another name for him. Okay? Zeus, god of the air, etc., etc. So he says, I'd rather be a pagan suckled that is breastfed from youth in that kind of creed. Why? So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, this is kind of, high ground overlooking the ocean. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. He's saying, if I had been suckled in this pagan creed, what might happen to me standing up here looking out on this ocean. This gets at the idea of the power of suggestion.
What does forlorn mean?
Lack of hope. If you're forlorn, it means the lorn part goes back to the Old English word for teaching. Okay, it means you're without teaching, without guidance, ultimately kind of without hope. Okay, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, because if he'd been suckled in this pagan creed, the pagan creed would tell him what? There are gods and goddesses. There are animating spirits everywhere around us. I mean, we could open those blinds and we look at the trees. The trees, old Greek mythology, the trees have spirits in them. The rivers, the streams, naiads, dryads, nymphs, N-Y-M-P-H-S, okay? So might I, standing on this pleasantly, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. And he gives us another image, have sight of Proteus rising from the sea. Or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. But because he's not been suckled in that pagan creed, he doesn't have these experiences. Why? Because the new, not Christian, okay, understand this properly. The new creed that the speaker kind of has been suckled on is the scientific mentality. See, that's one of the things the Romantics were rebelling against. The Romantics were saying, no, reason isn't the end all and be all of human existence. We cannot understand everything. Sometimes there is more to be seen just in appreciating a flower or a leaf than there is in understanding its scientific composition and such. One of my favorite writers, a guy named George McDonald, a little bit later than Wordsworth, mid-19th to early 20th century, Scottish writer, has this wonderful little essay on the fantastic imagination. He wrote fantasy, he wrote poetry, wrote a lot of novels that most people don't read because most of them aren't very good. But he has this wonderful essay on the fantastic imagination where he essentially, at one point he asks a question: which is more useful and powerful, to say, to give the scientific cause for a rainbow, sunlight refracting through water droplets in the air, the water droplets acting like a prism and creating Roy G. Biv, that kind of thing, or to just be filled with wonder at looking at it. And part of what he gets at there is what is better for the imagination and for the soul. Better, not more, true, because the scientific one is more quote unquote true. But he says this other mentality, like the description, for example, of the sun and our experience of the sun. What do we say the sun does? Rises in the east and sets in the west. Scientifically true? Not at all. It's the earth that's moving. See, prior to Galileo proving, we talked about the other day, proving Copernicus and Brahe correct, that's what was thought. The sun literally rises and you stand still and then it goes, etc. Okay? Go from there to, she walks in beauty, 1048. George Gordon, Lord Byron, on a quiz or the final exam, if you put either of those down, if you put down George Gordon or Lord Byron, it'll be correct. If you put them both down, that's fine too, okay? Byron's also a romantic poet. Should have mentioned him before. He's one of the biggies, one of the real biggies, okay? Notice this is, we're told it's from Hebrew Melodies. This is a series, I believe, of poems that he wrote, the Hebrew Melodies. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes. Thus mellowed to that tender light, which heaven to gaudy day denies. When shade the more, when ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face. Where thoughts serenely sweet express, how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, so eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days of goodness spent. A mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Okay? 3 stanzas. Who's the she? Ever told, ever implied? Nope. Okay? She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. So, notice how beauty gets described. Natural world. Okay? Like the night of cloudless climates in starry skies. Murfreesboro, you go outside in the middle of the night, you'll see some stars, but you won't see a lot. In 1814, not in London, but in 1814 outside London, England, as long as you weren't in one of the manufacturing cities like Manchester or Leeds, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, I'm pretty sure, all either lived or spent a great deal of time in what's called the Lake District, northwestern England, okay? Away from population centers, all right? You go outside on a night in the Lake District, you look up, you're gonna see 1,000,000 stars. And in their day, you would see even more. Why? Because you didn't have the light pollution that we have. Even in places away from cities and stuff, today, there's still light pollution. So, in all that's best of dark and bright, so all that's best of darkness and all that's can't get the word out, best of lightness or brightness, meet in her aspect. What's her aspect? It's her face and her eyes. So is that telling us something about her complexion and her eye color? Is her face bright and her eyes dark? Thus mellowed to that tender light. No. What he's getting at is the best of dark and bright are what? They're tempered together. Not into like a gray. But he's saying there's this, you take the two and you melt, to use his verb, mellow them together so that you get what is really fantastic about the night and what is really fantastic about the day. Both those meet in her. Thus mellowed to that tender light, which heaven to gaudy day denies. Why is the day described as gaudy? What does gaudy mean? Showy. It'd be like if one of you, women, came in here dressed to the nines. I mean, you were dressed to go out and just kill. I mean, literally, like at a date, okay? Or one of the guys comes in with a tux and just looks like James Bond. You would go, come on, man, it's 8:30 on a Monday morning, last, week, what do you, okay? Gaudy day, the bright sun governs everything, okay? Stanza 2. One shade the more, that is one coloration slightly darker. One ray of brightness, the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress. So now what have we been told about her? What color is her hair? Tress refers to her hair. It's black. How black?
Black as a raven.
Black as a raven. I don't know if we've ever looked at a raven up close. A crow will do in the United States. We have very few ravens. You look at a raven's feathers, and if you kind of move slightly, it's like the feather changes color.
A little shimmer of purple.
There's a little shimmer. That's the impression he's getting at. Okay? You look at her hair one way, and you see what does really pitch black hair do. It shines. If there's any light source, it'll shine. Just kind of like I get a little shine off this. Okay? Had half impaired, notice, the nameless grace. That is, the speaker is like, she is a goddess. Just her being in this presence imparts grace. But you take one shade of darkness, one ray of light difference, and it's gone. Okay? Or softly lightens o'er her face. Okay, so the one shade of darkness, one ray of light, you remove those, and it does what? It half impairs the nameless grace, which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face. See, I think the darkness is primarily what's in the hair, and the ray is what's in her face. We would say, I don't know if you've ever known many pregnant women. I've got pretty good radar for detecting when a woman's pregnant, maybe even before my wife has been places with, we've seen somebody went on, I've said, is so-and-so pregnant? And she goes, she just found out. And I hadn't heard a thing. Why? Because often when a woman gets pregnant, first 6 to 8 weeks, there is a glow. And it's like, it's not a flush, it's not redness, there's just something, and it's not only in the face. I mean, it's all the skin kind of gives it off. That's what he's getting at. Notice, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. Notice, the face, he says, expresses her thoughts, which are pure and dear. Okay? Because the thoughts are in the head. Okay? So, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. Now, literally, the thoughts are in the head, but what is the real dwelling place? It's her whole being. Okay? So now he kind of zooms in. So the first stanza, it's kind of like looking at her from a little bit of a distance. Okay? And then we get a little closer, and we focus on her face and hair. And then third stanza. And on that cheek, so we're no longer really paying attention to the hair, it's just the face now. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, so eloquent. Eloquent means what?
Well spoken.
Well spoken. Good with words. Her face, her cheeks, and her brows, notice we're told, are eloquent. She doesn't have to say a thing. Her face tells you everything. What? About what she thinks and believes? Nope. About her. Have you ever met someone, you see someone and you just think, I don't know about that person. And then you come to find out, yeah, I don't know about that person. I think I mentioned the story in here, one year, one of my older sisters and I went trick-or-treating. I don't know, I was 10, 12 years old. Guy who lived 4 doors down from us, we found out, 10 years later, maybe longer, 10 or 15 years later, the guy was a serial murderer. I mean, he lived 4 doors down. He moved there maybe 2 or 3 years before this happened. So my sister and I were trick-or-treating. This is back in the 70s in California where you didn't have small subdivisions. I mean, it was just a massive city. And, he's dressed all in black, invited us in. We could look through the door, the living room. We had friends who used to live there many years before. The living room was painted black. I mean, the walls were all black. And he had black light in the living room. And we're kind of like, no, don't think so. And we left, and he followed us the rest of the way down the street. Our street was about a quarter mile long. And then he stopped as we kept going. And we found out literally, so that must have been about 72, 74, found out around 85, 86. So yeah, 12, 13 years later, he was a massive mass murderer. I mean, 20 or 30 bodies discovered in the Central Valley of California. He's one of the worst mass murderers in the United States. Leonard Lake, if you want to look him up, had an accomplice. We just got the heebie-jeebies just looking at him, okay? This is the opposite of that. So soft, so calm, so yet eloquent. The smiles that win, the tints that glow. The smiles that win what? Because win implies you get something. Friendship, acceptance, loyalty, whatever. The tints that glow, that is the varying coloration in her cheeks, but tell of days in goodness spent. How is she being described? She's like a saint. All right? A mind at peace with all below. What's the all below? Us. Everyone who is not her. A heart whose love is innocent. And this is, I think the language is intentionally saint-like. Because whose heart is innocent? Not mine. I'll go out on a limb here. Probably not entirely any of yours. Okay? And who has spent all their days in goodness? And again, I'm going way out on a limb here. Is he talking about Mary? Is the speaker discussing Mary? Because if you're familiar with I think I'm thinking of another class, aren't I? Yes, I am. If you're familiar with saints' lives, or lives of saints, okay, that pretty much describes Mary. If you're familiar with the story of Mary, not from the Bible, but from extra biblical sources that date from the same period, at the age of 3 years old, her parents took her to the temple in Jerusalem, and she was raised from the age of 3 to 12 in the temple. The tradition of the church says she was fed by angels. Life in goodness spent. Okay? I don't know that that's what Byron intends or not, but kind of seems like it to me. Okay. She walks the meeting. Next one, dog's death, we've already done, so we won't do that again. So, 786, how much time do we have? 15 minutes, we've got time. 786, do not go gentle into that good night. A very, very different poem than She Walks in Beauty. This is what's called, make sure I have the right page. Yeah, a villanelle. A very hard structured poem to write, okay? Notice what it says at the top of the page. You have 5 tercets, that is 3-line stanzas, and a concluding quatrain. The first and third lines of the initial tercet rhyme, notice, night, light, okay? These rhymes are then repeated in each subsequent tercet, 3-line stanza, and in the final 2 lines of the quatrain. The final stanza is a quatrain. Moreover, line 1 appears again in its entirety as lines 6, 12, and 18, while line 3 appears again in lines 9, 5, 9, 15, and 19. That isn't just for this poem by Dylan Thomas. If you're going to write a villanelle, that's the structure you have to follow. That is the rule, okay? So, Dylan Thomas, Welsh author, died of alcoholism at 40 years old? No, 39. Yeah, 39. Died of alcoholism at 39. There's a wonderful, every now and then it's on TV called Child's Christmas in Wales, written by Thomas. It has been dramatized. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. So notice line 1 gets repeated at line 6. Good men, the last way by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men, who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Now, compare this poem with Donne's Valediction Forbidding Morning. As virtuous men pass mildly away, and some say the breath goes now, and some say nay, or some say the soul goes now, and some say nay. Virtuous men die totally silently. The speaker here is telling the audience, so to speak, who specifically is the audience. First line of the final quatrain, my father. Okay? He tells the father, the speaker tells the father what? Fight it. Fight death. Don't go calmly and quietly. Okay? So go back to the first tercet. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Old age should do what? It should be hot. It should be passionate. And it should go out crying. Not tears, yelling. Okay? Second stanza. Though wise men at their end know dark is right. Wise men know at their end, when they're going to die, what? That darkness is right. That's what comes with death. Okay? Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle. What does that mean? Their words had forked no lightning.
You know, like no one listens to them anymore.
Could be. No one listens to them. Their words don't. What does lightning do? You see a burst of lightning in the night sky. What does it do? Lights up everything. Okay? Their words, I think he's implying, didn't give light. They didn't give understanding. They didn't give clarity. Why? Think Hamlet. Think specifically his to be or not to be speech. What is death? It's the undiscovered country from whose bourne no one returns. That is, they said, when they were still living, these wise men, you know, death is what comes when you get old and you die, and darkness is appropriate for that. In other words, they had a rational understanding. Okay? But their words didn't do what? Does that give comfort? No. The words didn't give comfort or understanding. And because they don't, they do what? They do not go gentle into that good night. They're still afraid of death. Good men, and that's kind of like Donne's virtuous men, the last wave by, and I don't know if the last wave means the last wave of good men, and that is after them there aren't any more, or it doesn't mean the last wave, like you're waving goodbye to those who are left behind, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Their frail deeds. I think he's talking about good deeds. Those good deeds might have danced in a green bay. Well, green bay kind of implies, like a water bay. But it could mean something else. I'm not sure what. All right? They cry that their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. I think he's suggesting they get ready to die, and they're thinking, what about their good deeds? Not enough. And that's why they rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight. Remember how To His Coy Mistress ended? Though we cannot make the sun stand still, yet we will make him run. How? By having sex. That's what the speaker's implying in that poem. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, that is, they burned out the day, and learned too late. They grieved it on its way. That is, they learned too late on their deathbed. They didn't really tire the sun. They didn't really wear it out. They do what? They do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, notice the pun. Grave men near death, that is, near their grave. Grave also means serious, profound. They do what? Who see with blinding sight. What do they see with blinding sight? Notice there's no mark of punctuation at the end of that line. So the implication is it's the predicate that comes after. Who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Great men see that blind eyes could blaze. That is, like give off light. And be happy. That's what be gay means. How so? He's saying you don't have to see the world in order to experience joy. Okay? It could also be that the blinding sight they see is what? Their impending death. And why is it blinding? Because they're no longer seeing. That's why their sight, next line, is blind. Okay? Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. That is, the thing they see blinds them. That blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. They rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, there on the sad height. What's the sad height?
So like the pedestal we spit them on?
Could be that. What else? It could be the precipice, and there's death. Like he's getting ready to step over. Curse, bless me now. With your fierce tears I pray. Notice, I don't care what you do, but do something. Curse me or bless me, it doesn't matter. Just do not go gentle into that good night. Pure speculation. Assume the speaker is talking about a real father. What might be the present state of the real father?
Like on his deathbed.
And probably on his deathbed.
Absent.
Louder?
Absent.
How?
He left.
Okay.
Like his mind's gone.
Unconscious. Mind's gone.
Kind of like Alzheimer's or dementia.
Could be. You know, when my dad died, I wasn't there. When my mom died, I was there. You know, but there was no, oh, I'm going now, you know, death kind of a thing. It was just, she hadn't, quote unquote, seemingly been there the whole few days before I, you know, when I got there, before her death, kind of a thing, okay? So what do the last two lines suggest? If that's the case, say something, wake up, speak to me, give me a last word. I mean, this is a plea for Daddy, one last word, all right? At least that's the way I read it. Death be not proud. We can do that in 2 minutes, I think. 8:19. Another poem by John, the next two are both by John Donne. This is one of his holy sonnets. It says 1611. I don't know why. We don't know when Donne wrote this. My dissertation was an edition of Donne's sonnets. We don't know when Donne actually wrote this poem. Death be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swell'st thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Okay? Notice one of the things he does in here is he uses images of death. Sleep. Okay? Notice. For those whom thou thinkst thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. Rest and sleep, he says, are pictures, images of death. I mean, why do we put rest and peace on a tombstone? So if we get pleasure from rest and sleep, how much more pleasure will we get from death? He's playing on that Platonic idea that everything down here is images, copies of the real thing. So if rest and sleep give us pleasure, then the real rest and sleep, death, will give us even more pleasure. Okay? And when our best men go with death, what do they receive? Rest of bones and soul's delivery. Kind of Hamlet's freedom from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And then notice the speaker says death is a slave to what? Fate, chance, kings, desperate men, like getting stabbed in an alley, you know. And dust with poison, war, and sickness dwell. And poppy or charms can make us sleep as well. Poppy, he is talking about opium. And notice poppy and charms can make us sleep as well. How? Is he just talking about an opium-induced sleep? Possibly. How else? Overdose. And better than thy stroke. Why swellst thou then? swell, because death is swollen with pride. One short sleep past, we wake eternally. Some of the manuscripts of this poem read, one short sleep past, we live eternally. Death and resurrection. And death shall be no more. O grave, where is thy sting? O death, where is thy victory? St. Paul says. Okay? Death, thou shalt die. Because death is the last thing that will be overcome in traditional Christian theology. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll pick up with That in My Heart for Wednesday and do these other poems then. Quiz due Wednesday. It's a real easy one. It's just titles. You just give me the names of the poets. And then the final exam is posted, and it's due Sunday night.